Thank you all for joining me in tonight's story. If the darkness within the walls of this tale left you with a chill, you're not alone. But remember, there's always more lurking in the shadows. If you enjoyed this experience, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with anyone you think can handle the silence that haunts us all. This is The Silent Horror. Stay tuned, because the story is never truly over. Welcome back anytime. And remember, the quietest whispers are often the ones that scream the loudest. Lena had always thought the worst thing in life was losing someone you loved. But as she stood at the edge of the old crumbling house, staring at the remnants of her grandmother's life, she realized that true terror was something far worse. It was the feeling of being forgotten, of fading into a memory too distant to ever return to, even in the hearts of those you once loved. The house held secrets, yes, but the most haunting secret of all was that it might already be too late to save anyone, even herself. Lena sat at her kitchen table, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee that had long since lost its comforting warmth. The morning sun filtered weakly through the blinds, casting pale light across the small, cluttered apartment. It was the kind of day where everything felt muted, half alive and half waiting. The world outside her window seemed far away, obscured by the fog of an early fall chill. Her fingers idly traced the edges of an old letter she had received 2 days ago. The envelope was thick, heavy, and yellowed with age, sealed with a crimson, wax stamp that caught the light. It wasn't the kind of letter she usually received. There were no bills, no marketing offers, just this single, cryptic message that had arrived without warning. It had been addressed to her in an elegant, looping script. To my dearest Lena. Lena had stared at it for hours before finally tearing it open. The handwriting was unmistakable, the ink slightly faded but still legible. I am gone, child. I hope you are well. I have left you something important, something that only you can understand. Please come to Blackstone Hollow and claim what is yours. There are things about this house I never told you, things I must explain to you now. Your grandmother, Eliza. Eliza, her grandmother, whom Lena hadn't spoken to in years. The last time she had seen her, Lena was just a child, visiting the sprawling, isolated mansion in Blackstone Hollow. Her parents had always kept their distance, saying the old house was simply too far to visit, too much of a hassle. But Lena had always felt a strange pull toward it, something dark and magnetic she couldn't quite describe. As a child, her visits to Blackstone Hollow had been sparse and brief, filled with muted conversations and polite smiles. Her grandmother was a quiet, distant woman, more a fixture of the house than a part of Lena's life. There was something strange about Eliza, something that even young Lena had noticed. The house, too. The thick curtains drawn against the sunlight, the scent of dust and mildew in the air. The way the house seemed to hum with an almost invisible energy. Now, with the letter in her hand, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Eliza than she'd ever known. The house was hers now, all of it. But why? Why after all this time? After Eliza had been absent from her life for so long? Was this inheritance suddenly bestowed upon her? Lena couldn't help but feel like there was more to this letter than a mere gesture of a forgotten grandmother. She set the letter down, her mind racing with questions. There was no mention of the house's contents, no explanation of what Eliza had left her, no instructions for what Lena was supposed to do with the property or even the condition it was in. Just an address, Blackstone Hollow, and one peculiar detail. Please come, I will explain when you arrive. Lena didn't know what she was expecting from the letter, but this wasn't it. She glanced at the clock on the wall. It was mid-morning, and her day was already starting to slip away. She still had the laundry to fold, emails to send, errands to run. She should have been focusing on the responsibilities that were always pressing at the edges of her life. But something about the letter gnawed at her. Maybe it was the way it had arrived with no warning, or the fact that Eliza had left her a house in some forgotten part of the country, a place so far removed from Lena's busy life. Her phone rang, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a call from her mother. Lena, you got the letter, didn't you? Her mother asked. voice tense with a mixture of relief and something else, something Lena couldn't place. "Yeah, I got it. It's a little strange." Her mother sighed on the other end. "Your grandmother was always difficult. She didn't like to share things, and she never talked about the house much after you were little. It's been a long time since any of us had anything to do with it." Lena paused, sensing the unease in her mother's voice. "What do you mean?" "I mean that Eliza's house is not normal. It was always full of strange things. Antique furniture, old portraits that seemed to watch you. We all stayed away from it. Your father and I thought it was better that way, especially after your grandmother's health started to decline. I know. You didn't know her very well, but if you're going, Lena, just be careful. There's something off about that place." Lena frowned, her grip tightening on the letter. Her mother's words only deepened the knot in her stomach. She hadn't expected her family to be so hesitant, especially when it came to an inheritance. They were all looking for any excuse to leave Blackstone Hollow in the past. "I'll go," Lena said, her voice firm despite the unease growing in her chest. "It's mine now. I should at least see what she left me." Her mother didn't argue. "Just be careful, Lena." The line clicked, and the phone went dead. Lena stared at the device for a long moment before putting it down. She wasn't sure why her mother sounded so nervous, but something told her the warning wasn't meant to be taken lightly. Packing a bag didn't take long. There wasn't much to prepare for. A few clothes, toiletries, a journal to write down her thoughts, a flashlight. The journey from her apartment in the city to Blackstone Hollow would take a few hours, but it was isolated enough that Lena knew she'd need to rely on her own instincts and resources. The drive was uneventful, save for the increasing sense of isolation the further she went. The roads grew narrower, winding through thick forests that seemed to press in from both sides. The trees were so dense, the sky almost disappeared entirely, and the air had that same damp, musty quality she remembered from her childhood visits. To the house. Finally, after what felt like hours, the house came into view. It stood at the end of a long gravel drive, surrounded by tall, weathered trees. Its Gothic silhouette loomed against the gray sky, casting long shadows over the land. The house was massive, 3 stories tall, with high windows and a broad, sweeping porch. Ivy crawled up the walls, and the roof was barely visible behind overgrown branches. Lena parked her car at the foot of the driveway and just stared. Her breath caught in her throat. The house hadn't changed. It was exactly how she remembered, silent, imposing, and waiting. She grabbed her bag, stepped out of the car, and made her way to the front door. As she reached for the handle, she hesitated. Something felt off. The door was just a door after all. But the weight of it, the stillness of everything around her, seemed to press on her chest, heavy and suffocating. With a shaky exhale, she turned the handle. The door creaked open, and Lena stepped inside. Lena stepped into the house, and the door creaked shut behind her with a finality that made her stomach twist. The air inside was cool, thick with the scent of aged wood and dust. The floorboards groaned under her feet, as though the house were waking from a long slumber. She stood still for a moment, allowing her eyes to adjust to the dim light filtering in through the heavy curtains. Everything felt muted, as if the house itself was holding its breath. The entryway was vast, much larger than she had remembered. The high ceilings made her feel small, the grand staircase curving up toward the second floor, like a skeletal hand reaching for the sky. There was a thick layer of dust on everything, from the intricate furniture to the large, faded portraits that lined the walls. The faces of her ancestors stared down at her with eyes that seemed just a little too alive. Lena shook off the feeling and walked forward, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. She had to admit, the house was impressive. It was beautiful in a way that felt almost otherworldly, its old-world charm still lingering despite the neglect. There were towering bookshelves filled with ancient tomes, polished brass chandeliers that had long since lost their glow, and a grand piano tucked against one wall, its keys yellowed with age. But there was something about the stillness, the oppressive quiet that filled the space, that made her skin crawl. Lena took a deep breath, This was her inheritance, her responsibility now. She needed to understand why her grandmother had left it to her, and what she meant by, "There are things I must explain to you." As she explored the main floor, she noticed the hallway stretched much longer than expected. The house had always felt like a labyrinth when she was a child, but now, as an adult, it was even more confusing. Rooms branched off in odd directions, many of them closed with heavy wooden doors, some slightly ajar. She wondered where everything had gone: furniture, belongings. It seemed as though the house had been untouched for years. At the far end of the hallway, she saw a closed door, tucked between a pair of tall, narrow windows. She didn't remember it from her childhood, and for a moment she hesitated, staring at the faded wood with a peculiar sense of unease. There was something about it, the way it was positioned, the way it waited, almost as though it had always been there, and yet it felt new. Lena walked toward it, her pulse quickening. The door was slightly cracked, just enough for her to see a sliver of what lay beyond. Her curiosity won out. She pushed the door open. What she found beyond it took her breath away. The room behind the door was unlike any other she'd seen in the house. The walls were covered in floor-to-ceiling mirrors, each one perfectly polished with no seams or imperfections. The room felt cold, unnaturally cold, even though the rest of the house was warm. She stepped inside, the temperature drop making her breath fog in the air. The mirrors stretched endlessly, reflecting her every movement in perfect synchronization. She could see herself standing there, but there was something off about it. Her reflection seemed too perfect, too still, as if it wasn't quite her. The way she moved in the mirrors felt wrong. She tried to turn to the left, and her reflection did the same, but a split second after she did. Lena frowned. Something about the mirrors was wrong. She stepped farther into the room, but the moment she did, the door behind her slammed shut with a loud bang. Lena whipped around, her heart racing. But there was no one there, just the cold, gleaming mirrors reflecting her every movement. She took a tentative step forward, then another, until she was standing in the center of the room. The mirrors surrounded her, encasing her in their polished surfaces. Then, without warning, the room seemed to shift. The reflections grew sharper, clearer, as if something inside them was moving. Lena's heart pounded in her chest. Her reflection didn't move. It smiled. A chill ran down Lena's spine, and she stepped back, her breath quickening. The smile in the mirror was wrong. It was too wide, too sharp, the corners of its mouth curving upward in a way that wasn't natural. It wasn't her smile. It was something else. Suddenly, the reflection spoke. "You found it," it said, its voice echoing inside her head. "You finally found me." Lena's throat went dry. She opened her mouth to speak, but her words caught in her chest. The reflection in front of her was still smiling, but its eyes, her eyes, were different. There was something dark behind them, something waiting. "I've been waiting," it whispered, its voice low and cold. "Your grandmother knew you would come. She knew one day you would be the one to open the door. She knew you'd be the one to release me." Lena took a step back, her hands trembling. What are you talking about? Who are you?" The reflection laughed, a sound that chilled her to the bone. "I am her, and yet I am not. I was locked away, trapped here for so long, trapped behind the glass. But you..." It leaned forward, eyes gleaming with something sinister. "You have the key. You have opened the door. You've set me free." Lena's heart raced as she backed away from the reflection. She didn't understand. What was it talking about? Who was it? Her grandmother? Eliza? "What do you want from me?" Lena's voice trembled. She could feel the room growing colder, the mirrors reflecting not just her movements, but the terror now etched across her face. The reflection's smile grew wider, impossibly wide. It was no longer a mirror. It was something else, something alive. "I want what has been denied to me," it whispered, its voice now a low hiss. "I want what your grandmother took from me. I want her life, and now I want yours." Lena's breath hitched as the room around her seemed to pulse with an unseen force. The mirrors rippled like water, distorting the reflection of her face. She stumbled backward, but there was nowhere to go. The walls, the ceiling, the floor, all of it was mirrored, and every reflection was watching her, waiting. She turned, desperate to escape, but the door was gone. A single thought echoed in her mind. This room has no exit. Lena's chest heaved with panic as she turned in frantic circles, her hands grasping for the door that had vanished behind her. The mirrors gleamed in front of her, impossibly smooth, reflecting her every movement with eerie precision. Her reflection stared back at her, smiling, no, grinning, in a way that made her insides turn to ice. The room had no exit. Her heart pounded in her ears, but her mind couldn't keep up with the whirlwind of thoughts and questions racing through. Her head. Was she losing her mind? Had the house somehow changed? The chill in the air wrapped around her like a vice. The oppressive stillness seemed to grow thicker with every passing second. The mirrors shimmered, distorting the edges of her vision, making the room feel as though it were shifting with each breath she took. Her reflection. It wasn't her. A gasp escaped her lips, her voice too quiet against the suffocating silence. She stumbled back, feeling the cold, smooth surface of the mirrors with shaking hands. Her reflection didn't move with her. It lingered, staring, waiting. The eyes in the mirror were not her eyes, and that was enough to send her into a full-blown panic. She had to escape. She had to. Turning toward the far wall, she tried to push against the mirrors, looking for any sign of a hidden door or an escape route, but there was nothing. The room was perfectly symmetrical, its design too deliberate to be an accident. The polished mirrors made it feel as though the walls themselves were closing in. She was trapped. A low whisper, barely audible at first, slid through the air like a chill breath against her ear. "You can't escape me." Lena froze, her breath caught in her throat. She whirled around, expecting the room to be empty. But there, standing just behind her reflection, was something else. A figure, impossibly still, yet entirely alive. The reflection of a woman, her grandmother Eliza or something like her, smiled at Lena through the mirror, but her smile was too wide, too sharp, too hollow. Lena stumbled back, her heart slamming against her ribs as she pressed her hands against the glass. The reflection mimicked her, just a fraction of a second too slow, but the image of her grandmother remained. "Eliza," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Is that you?" The reflection's lips stretched into a grin that was both comforting and terrifying, as if the very shape of the smile was designed to deceive. The figure nodded, once, slowly. "I am Eliza," it said, its voice both familiar and strange, as if it came from somewhere deep within the mirrors themselves. It echoed with a kind of hollow reverberation, like the sound of a distant memory surfacing from the past. "But I am not the woman you think I am." Lena's breath caught. She felt herself being pulled deeper into the reflection, as if the glass itself was reaching for her, calling her in. "You are trapped," the reflection continued. "Just as I was. Just as she was." Lena's mind spun. She couldn't understand what it meant. What was it saying about her grandmother? Trapped? How was that possible? "Eliza," she whispered again, "what happened here?" The figure's smile faded, its eyes narrowing. The air grew heavier, the chill seeping deeper into her bones. For a moment, the room seemed to pulse, as if the mirrors themselves were breathing, their reflections rippling. Like water, the figure in the mirror leaned closer, its voice growing lower, more urgent. "You have to listen, child," it said, its tone serious, now devoid of the eerie calm. "This house, it's not just walls and furniture. It's a prison of glass." Lena's legs felt weak and she backed away, her hand still pressed to the smooth surface of the mirror. "A prison?" she repeated, her mind struggling to make sense of the words. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" The reflection's eyes grew darker. "I was locked away, trapped behind the glass, just as I trapped her." Lena stumbled backward, her heart racing. Her? Who? Who are you talking about? The reflection's gaze shifted, and Lena followed its stare. The figure's eyes locked onto her, and the smile returned. A smile that was no longer comforting, but cruel. Your grandmother, it whispered. She knew what I was. She knew how to keep me locked away. But she broke the rules. She thought she could escape me. Lena's blood turned to ice. Escape you? She asked, her voice shaking. What are you? What did you do to her? I was her. The reflection hissed the words of bitter sneer. And when she locked me away, she didn't just trap me. She trapped herself, her mind, her soul. She thought the mirrors would keep me from growing, but instead it was I who fed on her. Her life. Lena's stomach churned. Her mind raced. She wouldn't believe what it was saying. But why? Why didn't she just leave? Lena's words were desperate, frantic. Why didn't she tell me? The figure smiled, but it wasn't a smile at all. It was a grin. She didn't tell you because she was afraid. She was afraid of what she had done, of what she had become. The figure's voice dropped to a whisper. But you will learn, child, you will learn because you're the one who opened the door. The ground beneath Lena's feet seemed to shift. Her legs wobbled, and for a moment she thought she might faint. What are you saying? What do you want from me? The reflection's face twisted into something monstrous, its grin widening, its eyes gleaming with hunger. I want what she had. I want what she took from me, and I will take it just as I took her. A deafening crack echoed through the room. Lena's heart lurched and she stumbled backward. The mirror in front of her splintered. A jagged line ran across its surface, distorting the reflection, her reflection, into something twisted and grotesque. Lena's breath caught in her throat, her hands trembling as she realized the truth. She wasn't alone in this room. The house, the mirrors, they were alive, and they wanted her. Lena's breath came in shallow gasps as she backed away from the shattered mirror, her eyes wide with terror. The room around her seemed to pulse, the distorted reflections of her movements warping and flickering like a broken film reel. The jagged cracks in the mirror glowed faintly, as if the glass itself was alive, feeding off the fear that radiated from her. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, drowning out everything else. The reflection of her grandmother's face, if it could still be called her grandmother, stared back at her from the fractured glass, its smile now twisted into something far darker. The figure leaned forward, its eyes locked on Lena's, hungry and knowing. Lena's legs felt like lead as she stumbled backward, but no matter how many steps she took, the room seemed to stretch infinitely, the mirrors multiplying until she couldn't tell which direction was the right one. Every movement she made was mirrored back at her, but with a delay, as if her reflection had a mind of its own. No, this can't be real, Lena whispered to herself, shaking her head, trying to force the words to make sense. This isn't happening. But the figure in the shattered mirror, her grandmother's reflection, didn't stop grinning. It reached out a hand, the glass splintering with a sound that made Lena flinch. You're here now, child. You've come to claim your inheritance, it purred. But everything comes at a price. Lena's pulse raced as the air in the room grew colder, the oppressive atmosphere thickening, pressing in on her. She had to get out. She had to escape. She turned quickly, desperate for any exit. Her gaze flicked toward the door, the one she had entered through, but it was still gone. A blank wall stood in its place, as smooth and reflective as the rest of the room. Panic clawed at her chest. She was trapped. Why? She managed to choke out, turning back to the reflection. What do you want from me? The figure in the shattered glass tilted its head, its smile now impossibly wide. I want what was promised. I want the rest of what was taken from me. Lena's mind spun. What did it mean? What was taken? What was promised? She didn't understand. The house. This house had always been full of strange things, and Eliza had always been distant, secretive. But this was something else entirely, something dark, something old. She forced herself to take another step back, her voice trembling. I don't understand. My grandmother. She left this to me. What do you mean? What was promised? Fruité, Reflection's eyes narrowed, and for a moment its voice dropped to a low, ominous whisper. Your grandmother didn't leave you this house. She left you to me. Lena's heart skipped a beat. The words stung like ice, freezing her in place. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came. She felt the cold creeping deeper inside, her like fingers wrapping around her insides. No, Lena whispered, shaking her head. No, you're lying. The reflection in the shattered glass laughed softly, mockingly. Lena, it said, its voice laced with cruel amusement. Your grandmother was not the woman you thought she was. She locked herself away in this house to escape me, to escape the truth of who she was. She believed the mirrors could contain me, but she was wrong. Lena took a step back, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The words burned in her mind. She had always known her grandmother had been secretive, too secretive. But this was something beyond understanding. What are you? Lena demanded, the words slipping from her mouth in a rush. What are you, really? The figure's smile grew wider still, its eyes glimmering with an almost hunger-like gleam. I am what your grandmother feared. I am the thing she became when she tried to escape me. I am the reflection she couldn't escape. She locked herself inside the mirrors to keep me from growing, to keep me from reaching the world. But now, she is gone, and you are here. Lena's stomach churned. Her knees weakened, and she stumbled, barely catching herself against the edge of a nearby mirror. I don't understand, she gasped, trying to steady herself. You're telling me that my grandmother became you? The figure nodded. Slowly, its eyes gleaming with malice. In the end, yes. She became me, her reflection. She believed she could control the house, control the mirrors. But she was wrong. It was never about control. The mirrors consume. Lena felt her breath catch in her throat. She stumbled back, the room swirling around her as she tried to make sense of what the figure was saying. The mirrors consume. But how? Lena managed to ask, her voice shaking with disbelief. The figure's smile twisted again, the expression cruel and satisfied. It started with her, it said, voice growing low, almost a hiss. Your grandmother was always different. She was obsessed with her reflection, with how she appeared to others. It started as vanity, but vanity is a hungry thing, and it fed on her. She tried to trap me, to keep me in the mirrors, to imprison herself behind her own image. But in the end, all she did was feed me. Lena's mind reeled. This couldn't be real, could it? The figure leaned in closer, its face stretching in the mirror, impossibly distorted, its eyes wide with dark delight. You've opened the door. Lena, now the mirrors are alive again, and I will take what is mine. Your grandmother's life was my price, and now... It paused, its voice growing cold. Now it's your turn. Lena's breath hitched in her throat. No, she gasped. I won't let you have me. You have no choice, the reflection whispered, its voice now a mere breath against her ear. You're already mine. Suddenly, the mirrors around her began to shift, the once clear reflections warping and bending as if they were melting. The room was spinning. The walls seemed to close in around her, the figures in the mirrors reaching out for her, grasping. Her own reflection began to twist, its expression dark and distorted, its eyes empty of humanity. Lena felt a wave of cold wash over her. The house was alive, the mirrors were alive, and they were hunting her. No, she screamed again, her voice hoarse. I won't be trapped like her. But the reflection only grinned, and the mirrors responded. Lena's hands trembled violently as the mirrors around her rippled like water, distorting her reflection into grotesque shapes. The room had become something other than just a space. It was alive, hungry, pulsating with a dark energy she could feel in her very bones. The chilling cold that had clung to her skin deepened, and the shadows stretched unnaturally, crawling across the floor like living things. Her reflection in the broken glass still grinned at her, its eyes empty voids, hollow, mocking. "You're too late," it whispered. The voice now a chorus of whispers, rising from the mirrors and surrounding her like 1,000 forgotten voices. "The house will have you, just as it had her, just as it will always have you." Lena gasped for air, stumbling backward as her knees buckled beneath her. Her heart raced, each beat a loud thud in her ears. The house felt alive now, like the walls themselves were breathing. She could feel them closing in on her, suffocating her with the weight of its dark history. There was no escape, not here, not in this house. "No," she whispered to herself, shaking her head, trying to focus. "I won't let it take me. I won't." But even as the words left her mouth, she knew the truth. The house was already taking her, her fear, her energy, her soul. A low, guttural sound vibrated through the floor, reverberating in her chest. It was the sound of something ancient awakening, stirring from a long slumber. She turned toward the source, her eyes drawn to the far wall where the old grandfather clock stood. It had always seemed out of place in the house, ticking away with an eerie regularity, its face cracked and its hands frozen at midnight. But now, the hands of the clock were moving, slowly, deliberately. Lena's breath caught in her throat. The clock, it was wrong. The second hand ticked, but it wasn't moving in a normal fashion. It jerked as if fighting against its own mechanism. The heavy ticking reverberated through the house, and the shadows in the room seemed to grow darker, as though drawn to the sound. Suddenly the clock chimed once, a deep resonating toll that shook the walls and vibrated in Lena's bones. The air seemed to crackle, the room filling with a low hum. The mirrors seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. Lena's heart skipped a beat as the room around her began to shift. The walls seemed to warp, bending inward as though the house itself was twisting, folding, unraveling. The floor beneath her feet creaked ominously, and the sense of impending doom grew unbearable. Then a new sound filled the air. Slow footsteps, dragging across the floor, deliberate and heavy. Lena froze. She wasn't alone. Something else was in the house with her. The footsteps grew louder, closer, and she turned in a panic. Her breath hitched in her throat as she saw a figure standing at the end of the hallway. A woman dressed in dark, tattered clothes, her hair, wild and untamed, hanging in greasy strands around her face. Her eyes, Lena's eyes, glowed with a faint, eerie light, but they were empty, hollow. There was no humanity in them, just darkness. It was her grandmother, but it wasn't. "Eliza," Lena whispered, her voice breaking. She took a tentative step forward, but the figure didn't move. The woman, her grandmother, or the thing that had once been her grandmother, tilted its head, the smile stretching across its face. It was the same smile that had been in the shattered mirror, the same empty, mocking grin. "You don't understand yet, do you?" the figure rasped, its voice hoarse and hollow, like a whisper from the grave. "She thought she could lock me away. She thought she could stop me. But the house doesn't forget. The mirrors never forget." Lena's stomach twisted in knots, a deep dread filling her chest. "No," she whispered, stepping back again. "I don't believe you. I won't believe you." The figure's eyes glowed brighter, the unnatural light intensifying as it stepped closer. Its footsteps now in sync with the ticking of the clock, its body moving as though it was an extension of the house itself. "You can't fight it," it murmured, voice almost lost in the cacophony of sound growing around them. "You think you can break the cycle, but the mirrors have already claimed you. I've already claimed you." Lena's breath came faster, panic rising in her throat. She couldn't keep up with the thoughts spinning in her mind. The house, the mirrors, they wanted her. They had been waiting for her. From the moment the letter arrived, from the moment she stepped inside, she had been a part of this. A part of its dark, insidious plan. And now it was too late to turn back. She glanced around, her eyes frantically searching for anything, any way out. But the mirrors had already closed in around her, and the figure, her grandmother, or the twisted reflection of her, was only a few feet away now, its form shifting, stretching, distorting with each step. "Stop!" Lena cried, her voice desperate. She didn't know what else to do. She needed to stop this. She had to stop this. But the figure only smiled wider. "The mirrors see you," it whispered, its voice now a distorted echo of 1,000 voices. "They know you. They've been waiting for you, and when they've taken you, there will be no more escaping. You'll be just like her, trapped, forgotten." Another reflection in the glass. A wave of nausea hit Lena, and she sank to her knees, her hands gripping her head as the walls seemed to close in on her. The mirrors were everywhere now, surrounding her, trapping her, feeding on her. The figure's smile was the last thing she saw before the house swallowed her whole. And then there was only darkness. Lena's mind felt like it was sinking into a thick fog, her thoughts fragmented and disjointed. Her vision blurred in and out, as if the world itself were shifting, slipping in and out of focus. The air was dense, thick with an oppressive weight she couldn't escape. Her body felt heavy, like lead, and she struggled to move, to find her footing. But the floor beneath her felt like it was breathing. She wasn't sure how much time had passed. It felt like moments, yet hours, or maybe years. The world around her was swallowed in an impenetrable darkness. But somewhere, beneath the heavy shroud, she felt a stirring, a presence. Something was watching her. Slowly, her eyes adjusted and the darkness around her receded, revealing a place that shouldn't exist. She was back in the house, but not in the same room she had been before. The walls were now warped, as though they had grown and stretched with an unnatural organic pulse. The wooden beams overhead twisted like gnarled fingers, grasping for the ceiling. The mirrors were gone, but their absence was more disturbing than their presence. The walls now felt like the surface of a giant living creature, alive with a slow, rhythmic beating that echoed in her chest. Lena felt a cold shiver slide down her spine as she looked around. There was something strange about the air, something foul, but she couldn't place it. It wasn't just the thick, suffocating atmosphere. It was the smell, the stagnant, damp scent of decay that seemed to seep from the very walls. She tried to stand, her legs unsteady beneath her. Her hands reached out for the walls for support, but as soon as her fingers made contact, she recoiled. In horror, the surface was slick, wet, as if it were breathing beneath her touch. A low, rumbling sound vibrated through the floor, echoing in the hollow chambers of the house. The noise seemed to rise and fall like the deep, pulsing breath of something ancient, something alive. The darkness began to retreat, slowly, as though it had its own will. As Lena's surroundings came into sharper focus, she realized with a jolt that she was standing in the center of what appeared to be a long, winding hallway. The walls were adorned with portraits, faded, cracked faces staring down at her from their gilded frames. Their eyes followed her every movement, their expressions twisted in unnatural smiles. But it wasn't the portraits that terrified her. It was the shadows. They moved. No, not just moved. They shifted, slithering along the floor and walls like living creatures, like things that should not exist. Lena's breath caught in her throat as one of the shadows seemed to stretch toward her, curling around her legs with a slow, insidious creep. She gasped and pulled away, backing up into the far wall of the corridor. Her hands fumbled desperately at the surface, trying to find something, anything that would offer an escape. And then she saw it, a door. At the far end of the hallway, partially hidden in the shadows, was an ornate wooden door. It was carved, with intricate designs of vines and leaves. But what caught Lena's eye was the strange light that flickered beneath the doorframe. There was something alive in that light, something familiar. The same eerie glow that had emanated from the mirrors when she had first seen her grandmother's reflection. Without thinking, she lunged for it. Her feet barely touched the ground as she ran down the hallway, the oppressive air pressing in around her with every step. The door loomed closer with each breath she took, the flickering light growing brighter, calling her, drawing her in. But as she neared it, the shadows seemed to grow more restless, more aggressive. They scraped at her heels, whispering unintelligible words in voices that made her skin crawl. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. The door was just ahead, so close. She reached out, her hand shaking as it grasped the cold, tarnished handle. With a burst of energy, she yanked it open. The light was blinding. For a moment, Lena couldn't see anything, the brightness overwhelming her senses. But slowly, as her eyes adjusted, she realized she was no longer in the hallway. The room was vast, too vast, its dimensions defying all logic. The ceiling stretched impossibly high, disappearing into a void above her. The walls were lined with mirrors, each one framed in gold, each one reflecting a different version of Lena. Some mirrors showed her face smiling, others twisted in agony. Some reflected nothing at all. And in the center of the room, the center, was a massive, ancient clock. It was the same clock she had seen before, the one in the hallway, the one she had thought had been broken, but it wasn't broken. Its hands were spinning faster now, faster than she could comprehend, blurring as they revolved around the clock's face. The air hummed with a low, resonant sound, like the ticking of time itself being warped, distorted, bent. Lena stepped closer, drawn to the clock as though it was calling her. The closer she got, the more the room seemed to pulse around her. The walls shifted in and out of focus, the mirrors flickering with strange, unsettling images. And then, as the hands of the clock moved faster and faster, Lena felt it, the presence. It was the same feeling she had had when she first entered the house, the sensation of being watched, of being trapped. But now it was different. Now it was everywhere. The mirrors, the walls, the very air itself seemed to hold its breath. Lena's heart pounded in her chest as she turned back toward the door, only to see that it was gone. The hallway had vanished, entirely, leaving only the mirrors and the clock. A voice echoed in her head, a whisper, a command. "You are here for a reason, Lena." She spun around, her heart racing. The voice, it sounded like her grandmother's voice. But no, it wasn't. It was colder, harder. "Come closer," the voice urged, more insistent this time. "The clock will show you what you need to know. The time is right." Lena's feet moved before she could stop them, drawn toward the center of the room, to the heart of the clock. As she moved closer, the ticking grew louder, the air vibrating with the weight of it. The mirrors around her seemed to watch her with growing intensity, their reflections shifting with every step she took. And then, as her hand reached out to touch the clock's face, a loud crack shattered the silence. The clock's hands froze. The air went still, and for the briefest moment Lena felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She looked around, expecting something, anything, but the room had changed. The mirrors that had once reflected her were now empty. The shadows that had lurked in the corners had vanished. The oppressive feeling of being watched, being hunted, was gone. But in its place, a new presence, one she couldn't quite see but felt. It was watching her, and this time it wasn't from the mirrors. Lena's hand hovered just inches from the frozen clock's face, the deep hum of the room pressing against her skin like 1,000 invisible fingers. The mirrors around her no longer reflected her image. Instead, they reflected a world she didn't recognize, a dark and twisted version of the house. The walls were decayed, the floor covered in a thick layer of dust, the air thick with a sinister fog that seemed to choke the very life from the space. Her pulse quickened as she took in the scene. The reflection of the house in the mirrors wasn't just warped, it was wrong. It was as if the house in the mirrors had been the house, as if it had always existed that way, twisted, decaying, breathing in the shadows. And the clock, its hands had stopped, but not for long. A soft, raspy whisper filled the air. "It's too late." Lena jerked back, her heart thundering in her chest. Her breath came in shallow, ragged bursts. She scanned the room, but the voice seemed to echo from every direction at once. It was impossible to tell where it came from, because it came from everywhere. "You've already made your choice, Lena. The voice continued, now more of a hiss than a whisper. You've chosen to remain, chosen to stay. The weight of those words sank into Lena's chest like an anchor. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body refused to move. The room felt like it was closing in on her, the air pressing down, thick with an unnatural gravity. The clock, frozen only moments ago, suddenly jerked forward, its hands twitching as though they were alive, desperate to continue their cycle. Lena's mind raced. What was happening? Why did the house, the mirrors, feel so alive? Why did she feel like she had stepped into a nightmare where time had no meaning, no boundaries? Her grandmother's warning echoed in her head. The mirrors consume. But it was more than just the mirrors, it was the house itself. The house wanted her, needed her. Lena stumbled backward, her legs weak, but her resolve was solidifying. She had to get out, no matter what it took. This house, this nightmare, was not going to claim her. But as she turned, she saw it. The figure, her grandmother, or what had become of her, stood in the doorway across the room. But it wasn't just her grandmother. At least it didn't look like the woman Lena had remembered. The figure was more like a shadow, a black silhouette stretched out, the outline of Eliza's face twisted and distorted, as if it were made of smoke or mist. Her eyes glowed, though not with warmth. No, these were cold and hollow, burning with an empty hunger. You cannot leave, child, the figure crooned. Its voice was like sandpaper, jagged and painful. This house will never let you go. Lena's throat constricted. Her legs felt as if they might collapse beneath her, but she took a deep breath, forcing herself to stand tall. You're not my grandmother, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. You're something else. Something evil. The figure smiled, its lips stretching unnaturally wide. Oh, but I was your grandmother, Lena. I am your grandmother. The air around the figure seemed to shimmer with a dark energy, as if the very presence of the house fed into her. Don't you understand yet? The mirrors do not just reflect, they reshape, they create. The room trembled, the walls shaking, as the echoes of the figure's words bounced off the mirrors. Lena's heart pounded. Was it true? Had Eliza truly become this thing, this creature? The figure took a slow step forward, its blackened form seeming to dissolve into the shadows, like it was part of the house itself. I am what was left when I tried to escape, it continued, its voice no longer just from the doorway, but from the very walls around her. I became part of the house, part of the mirrors, part of the darkness, and so will you. No, Lena said fiercely, shaking her head. She took a step back, her feet stumbling, but she refused to let fear control her. I won't let you have me. I'll fight this. I will. The figure's smile twisted into something darker. You can fight all you want, child, but you'll never escape. You see, you were never meant to leave. Suddenly, the house groaned, a loud creaking sound coming from the walls, as if the building itself were alive, stretching, expanding. The mirrors around her began to shimmer, and one by one they began to glow with that same eerie light, casting shadows that writhed and shifted like living creatures. The clock's hands began to move again, faster and faster, each tick a violent, unbearable pull in Lena's chest. The sound of time grinding forward became deafening. The heart of the house beats in time with your fear, Lena, the figure said, its voice now seeping into the walls, the floor, the very air around her. The longer you stay, the more you become part of it. You will never leave, child, not while the house still remembers you. The room seemed to close in on her, the mirrors distorting, the walls twisting. Lena could hear her own heartbeat now, a loud and desperate sound drowning out everything else. She wasn't just trapped in a house, she was part of it. Lena's legs buckled beneath her, and she collapsed to the floor, her hands clutching her head as the weight of the truth crashed down upon her. She could feel the house, the very walls, pulling at her, reaching out for her, absorbing her, claiming her. No, she gasped, clawing at the floor, trying to push herself away from the center of the room, from the mirror that reflected her. Worst fears. But the shadows were already there, curling around her limbs, holding her in place. The whispers from the mirrors grew louder, now a cacophony of voices all calling her name. Lena, Lena, Lena. Her breath hitched in her throat. As the figure of her grandmother, the twisted reflection, stepped forward, its form almost entirely absorbed by the darkness. She could feel its coldness seeping into her skin, her very soul. "You cannot fight what has already claimed you," it whispered, the words floating through her like smoke. "The heart of the house is alive, and now, so are you." Lena's vision blurred, her body growing colder as she realized the truth. The house was not just a house, it was a living thing, and it had claimed her as part of itself. And there was no escape. Lena's hands were shaking, her body trembling with a coldness that seemed to pierce her very bones. She had fought it, tried to resist, but now the darkness was swallowing her whole, piece by piece. Her breath came in, shallow, panicked gasps as she lay on the floor, struggling to move against the oppressive force of the house. Every part of her wanted to run, to flee, but she knew, deep down, that there was nowhere to go. The shadows seemed to press in around her, suffocating her with their weight. The air itself was thick, like trying to breathe underwater. Her hands scraped against the floor as she tried to push herself up, but the darkness was relentless, winding itself around her limbs, pulling her down. The house is alive, she realized, her thoughts barely coherent in the suffocating pressure of the moment. It wasn't just the mirrors or the time-warping clock. The house itself was alive, a living, breathing thing that fed on fear and consumed everything that came near. And now it had her. "You are mine now, Lena," a voice whispered, low and serpentine, seeping from the very walls. It wasn't her grandmother's voice anymore. It was something darker, something ancient. "You were always meant to stay. The house has been waiting for you." Lena gasped for air, struggling against the tendrils of shadow that clung to her, their cold touch sending shivers through her spine. Every movement felt like fighting against a storm, as though the very walls of the house were trying to squeeze the life out of her. Her vision was spinning, and her chest tightened with an unrelenting pressure. "No," she whispered to herself, her voice shaking. "No, I won't let this happen." But the house wouldn't let her go. The shadows pulsed with life, and she could feel the house's heartbeat in her chest, each beat syncing with the throbbing of her own heart. She could sense the power of the house reaching deep into her soul, pulling her toward it. The clock, the center of the room, ticked louder now, its hands spinning faster, each tick a painful reminder of her fading chance to escape. And then, the mirrors shifted. Lena blinked, her eyes struggling to focus, but there was no denying what she saw. The mirrors were no longer just reflections of the house. They were windows into other places, other realities. Dark, twisted worlds where shadows consumed everything, where people walked with hollow eyes, their bodies twisted and distorted. Lena stared at one of the mirrors, her heart pounding in her chest as she saw something that almost made her sick. There, in the reflection, was a version of herself, a dark, twisted version with hollow eyes and a jagged smile, as if her very soul had been ripped from her body. The figure in the mirror reached out, its hand pressing against the glass, and Lena felt a coldness deep inside her, as if something was pulling her in. No, she thought desperately, her mind screaming for her to move, to fight, but her body refused. The shadows were too strong, the grip of the house too tight. The figure in the mirror smiled wider, its face contorting into something unrecognizable, and Lena felt a sharp, stabbing pain in her chest. It was as though something inside her was being torn apart, something deep inside her that she couldn't name. Her vision swam, the room spinning as she struggled to breathe, and then the shadows tightened their hold. A terrible pressure built in her skull, as if her very mind were being crushed under the weight of the house itself. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, a chorus of voices urging her to surrender, to accept her fate. She could feel her mind unraveling, slipping away from her, as if the house was reaching into her thoughts, claiming her. erasing her very identity. The walls began to pulse again, their rhythm slow and deliberate like the beat of a heart. And then, in the distance, Lena heard it, a sound that sent a shiver of dread through her very core. A door opening. The figure of her grandmother, or whatever it had become, appeared in the doorway across the room. Her face was still twisted and distorted, her eyes black and empty, but now she stood taller, her body more insubstantial, like a shadow herself, flickering in and out of existence. "You don't understand yet, do you?" the figure said, its voice dripping with malice. "This house is more than just walls and mirrors. It's a living, breathing thing, a creature that feeds on souls." Lena tried to speak, but the words were caught in her throat. She could barely breathe, could barely keep her thoughts together as the darkness around her seemed to push in from all sides. "You've already given yourself to it," the figure continued, stepping closer, its form flickering like a candle in the wind, just as Eliza did, just as every soul that has entered this house has. "You are part of it now, Lena. You're part of the house." A sharp pain shot through her chest, and Lena gasped, clutching at her heart as the shadows tightened their grip. The pain was unbearable, like something was ripping her apart from the inside out. She could feel the house's power seeping into her, filling every part of her being until she couldn't remember where the house ended and she began. "No," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "I won't become one of you." But the figure only laughed. It was a low, hollow sound like the clattering of bones. "You already are." Lena's body convulsed, and she collapsed to the floor, her hands clawing at the cold stone surface beneath her. The shadows had become too much to fight, and the pain, oh, the pain was unbearable. But just as she felt her consciousness beginning to slip away, a single thought pierced the suffocating darkness. The clock. She could still hear it ticking, louder and louder, the hands spinning, faster and faster. The room was alive with the sound, and Lena's heart seemed to beat in time with it, faster, as if the very fabric of time was unraveling. With everything she had left, Lena pushed herself toward the clock. The house's hold on her was tightening, but there was one thing she still had control over: her choice. She couldn't escape the house, but maybe she could stop it. The shadows hissed and writhed around her, but Lena reached the clock and placed her hand on its cold surface. The ticking grew louder, the hands spinning in a blur. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. And then, she did it. Lena twisted the hands of the clock. Lena's fingers gripped the hands of the clock with all the strength she had left, her body shaking as the shadows clawed at her. The ticking had become a deafening roar, filling her ears with its relentless, unforgiving rhythm. Each turn of the clock's hands seemed to push her further into the abyss, but still, she twisted them, desperate to break the cycle, to force the house to release her. The shadows swirled around her, twisting and writhing as though they were alive, responding to her defiance. She could feel them pulling at her legs, dragging her down toward the cold stone floor. The weight of the house, the ancient, malevolent force that had been feeding off her fear, seemed to press in from every direction, suffocating her, filling her with an overwhelming sense of hopelessness. But she couldn't stop. She wouldn't stop. With a guttural cry, Lena forced the clock's hands to turn, her fingers slick with cold sweat. Time itself seemed to recoil at her touch, as if the very fabric of reality was being stretched, twisted, and torn apart. The dark figure of her grandmother flickered in and out of view, its hollow eyes staring at her, empty, expectant. "Stop," the figure hissed, its voice a sickening mixture of sorrow and malice. "You cannot escape what is already yours, Lena. The house has claimed you. You belong to it." Lena gritted her teeth, her body shaking with the force of her struggle. She had to stop the clock. She had to break free. And then something shifted. The clock's hands froze, the room stilled. The shadows seemed to recoil, as if the house itself had been stunned into silence. For a moment, Lena's heart skipped a beat as she stood there, disoriented, gasping for air. The oppressive weight that had been bearing down on her was gone, replaced by an eerie stillness. The mirrors, too, had gone silent. No longer did they reflect twisted, broken versions of the house. Now the mirrors were empty. They reflected nothing. No distorted images, no darkness, just the cold, blank surface of the glass. Lena took a shaky step back, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what she had done, but for the first time since entering the house, she felt a glimmer of hope. Could it be? Had she done it? Had she stopped the house from claiming her? The figure of her grandmother, the thing that had once been her grandmother, stepped forward, its form flickering, unstable, as if it were barely holding onto its shape. Its hollow eyes locked onto Lena, the smile stretching wider, colder. "You think you've won," it hissed, its voice now like nails on a chalkboard. "You can't stop what is already alive. The house will never release you. It is in your blood now, Lena. It is in your soul." Lena's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the darkness creeping back in, but this time, something was different. Something inside her stirred. The room began to tremble again, but this time it wasn't the walls closing in. It wasn't the oppressive weight of the house. It was as if the house itself was afraid of her. She reached out for the clock again, her fingers brushing against its cold face. The hands of the clock began to twitch, slow at first, then faster, spinning in reverse. A deep, rumbling noise filled the air, as though the very foundation of the house were breaking. And then something shattered. The mirrors cracked, splintering into 1,000 jagged pieces, each one reflecting a different version of Lena. Some of her images smiled back at her, others wept, others were twisted in terror. The house screamed, a deep, guttural sound that shook the walls. The darkness recoiled as the mirrors shattered, the pieces falling to the floor with a deafening crash. The figure of her grandmother, no longer just a shadow, but a grotesque shifting thing, screeched in fury, its form disintegrating. In the wake of the mirror's destruction, the house trembled violently as if it were dying, its pulse erratic and chaotic. The walls groaned and cracked, and Lena could feel the floor beneath her feet begin to shift, as if the house was falling apart. "No!" the figure screamed, its voice a banshee wail. "You cannot undo it. It's too late. You cannot escape." Lena felt the house fighting back, but she wasn't afraid anymore. The darkness no longer controlled her. It no longer had the power to break her. She had broken it. The house shuddered violently, the walls bending and cracking as though they were made of brittle glass. The floor beneath her buckled, and the ceiling groaned as if the house were being torn apart by invisible hands. Lena took a deep breath, her chest heaving with exhaustion, but a sense of purpose filled her. She had done it. She had stopped the clock, broken the mirrors, and shattered the very foundation of the house. The darkness that had once seemed all-consuming, that had once promised to swallow her whole, was fading. But even as the house crumbled around her, a part of her knew this wasn't over. The house may have been broken, but there were forces at work here far greater than anything she could have imagined. The mirrors, the clock, the house itself. They were all part of something older, something far more dangerous than any of them had understood, and Lena was now part of that darkness, whether she wanted to be or not. As the house began to collapse, its walls crumbling to dust, Lena turned and ran. The ground beneath her feet shook violently, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. She had to escape. But with every step she took, the house seemed to follow, its whispers chasing her through the crumbling halls. The walls were no longer just walls. They were alive, shifting and pulsing with a rhythm all their own. The mirrors, shattered though they were, seemed to watch her with their fractured reflections, their cracked eyes unblinking. Lena didn't look back. She couldn't. The house was no longer just a house. It was something worse, and though she ran, she knew deep in her soul there was no escaping it. The house had already claimed her. The air was thick with the stench of decay as Lena stumbled through the crumbling halls of the house. The walls groaned, their once solid structures now disintegrating into dust and rubble with every step she took. It was as if the very bones of the house were giving way to something darker, something ancient and unstoppable. The whispers, once faint, now screamed in her ears, relentless and deafening, urging her to return, to accept her place within the house. But Lena was done. She was done running, done hiding from the truth. The house had taken so much from her, but she still had one thing left: her will. Her breath was shallow, her body exhausted, but her mind was sharp, focused. She had to finish this, had to end it. The clock, the mirrors, the house, it all had to be destroyed, wiped from existence before it could claim anyone else. The floor beneath her feet trembled once more, sending a shock of fear through her spine. It wasn't the house trying to hold her back anymore, it was something else. A presence that filled the space like a shadow, stretching into every crack, every crevice. She could feel it pressing in on her, watching her, waiting for her to make a mistake. Lena's hand brushed against the cracked surface of the wall, her fingers cold against the damp stone. As she passed through the long, narrow hallway, she noticed something strange, something she hadn't seen before. At the end of the hall, where the shadows seemed the darkest, there was a door. But it wasn't just any door. It was an old wooden door, cracked and worn, but it glowed faintly as if it held something important inside. Something that called to her, tugging at her very soul. The whispers intensified, now urging her to turn away, to forget about it, to leave this house, and never look back. But Lena felt a pull, an undeniable urge to move toward the door. This was where the house's power resided. This was the source of everything. With trembling hands, she reached for the door's handle. It was cold, its surface slick with moisture. As she turned it, the door creaked open, revealing a small, dimly lit room. Inside, she found what she had been searching for, the heart of the house. The room was filled with mirrors, hundreds of them, reflecting each other in a maddening loop. But they weren't just ordinary mirrors. These mirrors were the source of the house's power, the conduits for its darkness. They were alive, thrumming with energy, casting distorted reflections of Lena's every move. Each one showed a different version of herself, smiling, weeping, twisted with terror, consumed by shadows. In the center of the room there was another mirror, larger than the rest and perfect. It was the only mirror that wasn't cracked, that wasn't distorted. It was pristine, its surface gleaming with an unnatural light, as if it were calling to her. Lena stepped toward it, her heart pounding in her chest. As she gazed into the mirror, she saw not her reflection, but something else. A figure, a dark, shadowy silhouette that stood behind her, its features indistinguishable, but its presence suffocating. It was the house. It had always been the house. Lena's breath caught in her throat as the figure's hand slowly rose, reaching out toward her through the mirror. She could feel its coldness, its emptiness, as if the hand was reaching for her very soul. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She had broken the cycle. She had shattered the mirrors. She had tampered with time. And now, she would destroy the house once and for all. She raised her hand to the mirror's surface, feeling its icy coldness against her skin. The whispers in the room grew louder, more frantic, but Lena ignored them. She pressed her hand flat against the glass, and as she did, the house screamed. The mirrors shattered all at once, the sound of breaking glass filling the air like the death knell of a long-forgotten nightmare. The figure in the mirror writhed and twisted, its shape contorting as it tried to reach for her. But the cracks spread rapidly, spiderwebbing across the glass, the house's grip weakening. The floor beneath her feet cracked open, the foundation of the house crumbling away. The walls trembled and the ceiling groaned, the structure collapsing into itself like an imploding star. Lena stepped back, her heart racing, but she stood tall, unwavering. This was it, the end. The house, its mirrors, the clock, it was all coming undone. The darkness was unraveling, but just as the last of the mirrors shattered and the house began to collapse in on itself, Lena saw something she hadn't expected. Her grandmother. Eliza's figure stood at the far end of the room, her face hollow, her eyes black pits of darkness, but there was a faint glimmer of recognition in them. She was trapped within the house, a part of it now, a reflection of everything the house had taken. And as the house's final breath echoed through the crumbling halls, Lena's heart clenched. Her grandmother, the real Eliza, was still there. A part of the house, unable to escape the same fate that had claimed the souls of so many others. Lena didn't move toward her. She couldn't. She knew that if she did, the house would claim her once again, drag her back into the shadows, pull her into the mirrors, just as it had done to Eliza. With one last look, Lena turned and ran. The house was collapsing, falling to ruin, but the darkness would never truly die. It would linger in the cracks, in the broken glass, in the shattered timepieces. The house would always be there, waiting for the next lost soul to wander too close. Lena didn't look back. She couldn't. She had escaped, but a part of her, no matter how far she ran, would always be connected to the house. She was free for now. But as she walked away, the faintest whisper of a voice reached her ears, barely audible, like the wind rustling through the trees. Lena. And she knew, deep down, that she would never truly escape.